In 1997, a sonar operator aboard the USS Seawolf detected something that shouldn't have been there. Three Akula-class submarines, sitting silently in the deep waters of the North Atlantic, completely undetected by every other naval asset in the region. The discovery would change everything the United States Navy thought they knew about Russian submarine capabilities. But the man who made that discovery possible wasn't celebrated. He was nearly court-martialed 6 months earlier for insisting on a drill that his superiors called reckless, unnecessary, and a waste of valuable training time. His name was Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, and this is the story of how his obsession with clearing the Baffles saved not just his career, but potentially prevented a catastrophic intelligence failure during one of the tensest periods in post-Cold War history. If you find this story compelling, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We bring you incredible true stories of courage, persistence, and the human spirit every week. Now let's dive deeper into this extraordinary tale. The Baffles. Every submariner knows that word. It's the blind spot directly behind a submarine where the vessel's own propulsion system creates noise that masks everything else. Imagine driving a car where you can't use your rearview mirror, can't turn your head, and there's a constant roar drowning out any sound from behind you. That's what operating in the Baffles feels like for a submarine. It's a vulnerability that every submarine captain learns to manage, but few truly respect the way Marcus Webb did. Marcus grew up in Groton, Connecticut, quite literally in the shadow of the electric boat shipyard where America's submarines were born. His father worked as a welder there for 32 years, helping construct the vessels that would prowl the ocean depths during the Cold War. As a boy, Marcus would sit on the roof of their small Cape Cod house and watch the massive hulls being moved, imagining the day he would command one of those underwater leviathans. He earned his appointment to the Naval Academy through sheer determination, graduating in the top 15% of his class in 1985. His instructors noted his exceptional aptitude for acoustic analysis and his almost supernatural ability to visualize three-dimensional underwater environments. But they also noted something else: a stubborn streak that would either make him an exceptional officer or end his career prematurely. By 1996, Marcus had served on 4 different submarines, earning a reputation as one of the finest sonar officers in the fleet. He had been part of the crew that tracked Soviet ballistic missile submarines during the final years of the Cold War, spending months at a time in the frozen waters beneath the Arctic ice cap. He had heard things in those depths that would haunt him forever. It was during one of those Arctic patrols in the winter of 1989 that Marcus first developed his obsession with the Baffles. The USS Dallas, a Los Angeles-class fast-attack submarine, was trailing a Soviet Delta IV ballistic missile submarine through the Barents Sea. They had been following the Delta for 6 days, maintaining perfect position in the Soviet boat's baffles, invisible and undetected. Marcus was the lead sonar operator on that patrol, and he took pride in keeping the Dallas hidden. But on the 7th day, something changed. A faint sound, barely perceptible above the ambient noise, caught his attention. It was a rhythmic pulse, almost organic, like a heartbeat in the deep. He tracked it for 3 hours before he understood what he was hearing. There was another submarine behind them. A Soviet Akula-class attack submarine had been trailing the Dallas for at least 2 days, sitting in their own baffles, completely undetected. The hunter had become the hunted, and nobody on the Dallas had known. Marcus immediately reported to the captain, who ordered an emergency maneuver to clear their baffles. The moment they turned, sonar confirmed the contact. The Akula was less than 4,000 yards behind them, close enough to have launched torpedoes without the Dallas ever knowing they were under attack. The 2 submarines played a tense game of cat and mouse for another 18 hours before the Akula broke contact and disappeared into the deep. No shots were fired. No international incident occurred, but Marcus Webb was forever changed. He spent the next 7 years studying everything he could about the Akula class. The submarines were the pride of the Soviet Navy, designed specifically to counter American fast attack boats. They were quieter than anything the Soviets had built before, incorporating advanced hull designs and quieting technology that narrowed the acoustic advantage American submarines had enjoyed for decades. The Americans called the Akulas quieting revolution the Walker effect, named after John Walker, the Navy communications specialist who had sold submarine secrets to the Soviets for 18 years before his arrest in 1985. Walker's espionage had given the Soviets detailed information about American sonar capabilities, allowing them to design submarines specifically engineered to evade detection. Marcus understood that the rules of undersea warfare had changed fundamentally. The comfortable superiority that American submariners had enjoyed was eroding with every new Akula that slid down the ways at the Severodvinsk shipyard. The Russians were learning, adapting, and closing the gap. When Marcus was assigned to the commissioning crew of the USS Seawolf in 1995, he saw it as an opportunity to address the vulnerability that had haunted him since that Arctic patrol. The Seawolf was the most advanced submarine ever built, a technological marvel designed to hunt and destroy Soviet submarines in their own waters. Its sonar suite was generations ahead of anything else in the fleet, capable of detecting sounds at distances that seemed impossible. But Marcus knew that even the Seawolf had baffles. Even this incredible machine had a blind spot, and he was determined to develop procedures that would minimize that vulnerability. He proposed a new drill to his commanding officer, Captain Richard Harmon. The drill was simple in concept, but revolutionary in execution. Instead of the standard periodic Baffles clearing maneuver, Marcus proposed a continuous clearing protocol that would require the submarine to execute unpredictable turns at random intervals, making it virtually impossible for an enemy submarine to maintain a position in their blind spot. Captain Harmon listened politely, but dismissed the proposal. The Seawolf was already the quietest submarine in the world, he argued. The Russian threat was diminishing as their economy collapsed. The resources required for such constant maneuvering would interfere with the boat's primary mission profile. The drill was unnecessary. Marcus persisted. He submitted detailed analysis showing how the Akula-class submarines had improved with each successive flight. The latest variants, the Akula II boats, were approaching Western quieting standards. Some intelligence estimates suggested they might actually be quieter than older American submarines like the Los Angeles class. Captain Harmon remained unconvinced. He was a career officer with his eye on flag rank, and he had no intention of implementing unconventional procedures that might draw unwanted attention from Fleet Command. The Seawolf would operate according to established doctrine, and Lieutenant Commander Webb would focus on his assigned duties. But Marcus couldn't let it go. He began running unauthorized simulations during off hours, using the Seawolf's combat systems to model different clearing protocols. He recruited a small group of like-minded junior officers and enlisted men who shared his concerns. They ran hundreds of scenarios, refining the drill until it was as efficient as possible, while still maintaining the randomness necessary to defeat a trailing submarine. In March of 1996, Marcus made a critical error. During a routine training exercise, he ordered his sonar section to execute an unscheduled Baffles clearing maneuver without authorization from the captain. The turn revealed nothing behind them, but Captain Harmon was furious. The confrontation in the captain's cabin was brief and brutal. Harmon accused Marcus of insubordination, of endangering the ship, of putting his personal obsessions ahead of good order and discipline. He threatened to relieve Marcus of his duties and recommend him for court-martial. Marcus stood at attention, his jaw clenched, and said only this, "Sir, with respect, one day you'll understand why I did what I did. I only hope it's not too late when that day comes." Harmon didn't relieve him. Perhaps some part of him recognized the truth in Marcus's words. Perhaps he simply didn't want the paperwork and the questions that would come with relieving a decorated officer. Whatever the reason, Marcus remained on the Seawolf, though he was formally counseled, and his fitness report noted concerns about his judgment and his willingness to operate within the chain of command. The months that followed were difficult. Marcus was marginalized, excluded from planning meetings, and assigned to administrative duties that kept him away from the sonar room he loved. His career, once so promising, seemed to be spiraling toward an ignominious end. But fate, or perhaps the currents of history, was about to intervene. In the autumn of 1996, intelligence reports began filtering through the submarine community about unusual Russian naval activity. Despite the collapse of the Soviet Union 5 years earlier, the Russian Navy was showing signs of renewed vigor. The Northern Fleet was conducting more patrols than it had in years. Submarines that had been tied up at pier for lack of maintenance were being returned to service. Most concerning were reports about the Akula class. Analysis of acoustic signatures collected by the SOSUS network, the vast array of underwater listening devices that stretched across the Atlantic, suggested that the newest Akulas were significantly quieter than previous estimates had indicated. Some analysts believed the Russians had made a major breakthrough in sound isolation technology. The United States Navy needed to know more. They needed to get close to these new submarines, collect detailed acoustic signatures, and assess their true capabilities. And there was only one submarine in the fleet capable of doing this safely: the USS Seawolf. Captain Harmon received his orders in January of 1997. The Seawolf would deploy to the Barents Sea, the same waters where Marcus had first encountered an Akula 8 years earlier. Their mission was to locate and track Russian submarines, collecting intelligence that would shape American naval strategy for the next decade. Before the deployment, Harmon called Marcus to his cabin. The captain looked tired, older than his 52 years. The pressure of command, combined with the weight of their upcoming mission, had taken its toll. "Webb," Harmon said, "I'm going to be direct with you. I know we've had our differences. I know you think I've been too cautious, too wedded to established procedures. But I need you on this deployment. You know these waters, you know these submarines, and frankly, you know sonar better than anyone else on this boat." Marcus remained silent, waiting. Harmon continued, "I'm not going to authorize your clearing drill. The mission profile doesn't allow for that kind of constant maneuvering. But I am going to give you more latitude in running your section. If you hear something, I want to know about it. Immediately. No more going through channels. You report directly to me." It wasn't everything Marcus wanted, but it was something. He accepted the compromise and threw himself into preparing his team for the patrol. The Seawolf departed Groton on February 3, 1997, slipping beneath the gray Atlantic waters as a cold rain fell on the Connecticut coast. The crew was young but capable, most of them on their first deployment aboard a fast attack submarine. They had trained for months, but nothing could truly prepare them for what lay ahead. The transit across the Atlantic took 12 days. The Seawolf traveled deep and fast, using her remarkable speed to cover the distance while remaining undetected. Marcus spent most of that time in the sonar room, teaching his operators, refining their skills, preparing them for the challenge of tracking Akulas in their home waters. He told them about his experience on the Dallas, about the submarine that had stalked them without their knowledge. He told them about the Akula's capabilities, about the sophisticated quieting technology that made these boats so dangerous, and he told them about the importance of vigilance, of never assuming they were alone in the deep. "The ocean is not empty," he said during one late-night training session. "It's full of sounds, full of life, full of things that want to stay hidden. Our job is to hear what doesn't want to be heard, and the Russians don't want to be heard." The Seawolf entered the Barents Sea on February 15th, passing through the Guyuk Gap, the stretch of water between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, where NATO forces had long monitored Soviet submarine movements. The water grew colder, the pressure greater, as they descended to their operating depth. Captain Harmon established a patrol pattern designed to maximize their chances of detecting Russian submarines while minimizing their own exposure. They would creep along at 4 knots, barely moving, their advanced sensors reaching out into the darkness to detect any sign of enemy activity. For the first week, they heard nothing unusual. The sounds of the Arctic winter filled their headphones, ice cracking and groaning in the distance, marine life moving through the depths, the occasional distant rumble of a surface ship plowing through heavy seas. But no submarines. Marcus grew increasingly concerned. The intelligence reports had suggested significant Russian activity in this area, but they had found nothing. Either the reports were wrong, or the Akulas were even quieter than anyone had predicted. On the 8th day of the patrol, Marcus requested a meeting with Captain Harmon. In the privacy of the captain's cabin, he laid out his concerns. "We're not finding them because we're not looking hard enough," Marcus said. "We're relying on passive detection, waiting for them to make a sound. But if they're as quiet as I think they are, that's not going to work." Harmon frowned. "What do you suggest?" "We can't go active. That would give away our position to every boat within 100 miles. "I'm not suggesting we go active," Marcus replied. "I'm suggesting we start clearing our baffles more frequently. If the Akulas are out there, they might be behind us. They might be trailing us right now, sitting in our blind spot, watching everything we do." Harmon's expression darkened. "We've been over this, Webb. The mission profile doesn't allow for constant maneuvering." "Then change the mission profile," Marcus said, his voice rising. "Captain, I've been in these waters before. I've seen what these boats can do. If we don't clear our baffles, we're flying blind. Worse than blind, we're advertising our position to anyone smart enough to get behind us." The two men stared at each other across the small cabin. Years of tension, of disagreement, of fundamental differences in philosophy, hung in the air between them. Finally, Harmon spoke. "Fine. We'll increase our baffles clearing maneuvers, but I want you to understand something, Webb. If this delays our mission, if we miss our intelligence objectives because we're too busy looking behind us, that's on you. Am I clear?" Marcus nodded. "Perfectly clear, sir." The new protocol was implemented that afternoon. Instead of clearing their baffles every 4 hours, as standard doctrine prescribed, the Seawolf would now execute the maneuver every 90 minutes. The turns would be unpredictable, varying in timing and direction to prevent any trailing submarine from anticipating them. For 3 days, nothing changed. The Seawolf continued its slow patrol through the frigid waters, its sensors straining to detect any sign of Russian submarines. Morale began to suffer as the crew grew restless, tired of the endless waiting, the constant tension of operating in hostile waters. Marcus spent most of his time in the sonar room, listening. He wore the headphones so often that his ears developed sores from the constant pressure. He analyzed every trace of sound, every flicker of data, searching for the signature he knew was out there. On the 11th day, during a routine baffles clearing maneuver at 3 in the morning, Marcus heard it, a whisper of sound, barely distinguishable from the background noise that lasted only a few seconds before disappearing. It was so faint that his junior operators didn't even notice it, but Marcus knew what he had heard. It was a submarine, and it was behind them. He didn't react immediately. Instead, he made a notation in his log and waited. The next clearing maneuver was scheduled for 4:30. If the submarine was trailing them, it would have to move to maintain position when they turned, and moving meant making noise. At 4:28, Marcus gave the order for his operators to focus their attention on the sector behind the ship. At 4:30 precisely, the Seawolf executed a gentle turn to starboard, her bow swinging through the water as she checked her blind spot. And there it was. The same sound, slightly louder this time as the trailing submarine adjusted its position. Marcus's hands trembled as he fine-tuned his equipment, isolating the frequency, comparing it against the database of known submarine signatures. Akula class. No doubt about it. He called Captain Harmon to the sonar room. The captain arrived within minutes, still pulling on his jacket, his face creased with sleep. "What do you have, Webb?" Marcus pointed to the waterfall display, where a faint trace was barely visible among the ambient noise. "Akula, sir. Bearing 187, estimated range 8,000 yards. He's been trailing us for at least several hours, probably longer." Harmon studied the display, his expression unreadable. "You're sure?" "Positive, sir. I recognize that signature. It's an Akula 2, one of the quieter variants. He's barely making any noise at all, but he can't hide when he has to." "Move!" The captain was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Can we lose him?" Marcus shook his head. "Not without going deep and fast. which would compromise our mission. But we can turn the tables. Now that we know he's there, we can track him, collect intelligence on his acoustic signature, his operating patterns, everything. Harmon nodded slowly, a new respect evident in his eyes. All right, Webb, he's yours. Track him. Learn everything you can about him. But don't let him know we've spotted him. Let him think he's still invisible. What followed was one of the most remarkable feats of submarine tracking in naval history. For the next 72 hours, the Seawolf maintained its patrol pattern while secretly monitoring the Akula trailing behind them. Marcus's team worked in shifts, maintaining constant surveillance, documenting every sound the Russian submarine made. They learned its cruising speed, its preferred depth, the frequency of its propeller blades. They recorded the sounds of its machinery, the barely perceptible hum of its reactor, the whisper of water flowing over its hull. It was intelligence that would prove invaluable in future encounters. But Marcus wasn't satisfied. Something about the situation bothered him, an itch at the back of his mind that he couldn't scratch. The Akula was behaving strangely. Every few hours it would execute a series of complex maneuvers, weaving back and forth in a pattern that seemed almost random. It took Marcus 2 days to understand what he was seeing. The Akula wasn't just trailing them, it was clearing its own baffles, which meant there was something behind the Akula. The realization hit Marcus like a physical blow. He grabbed the headphones, focused every ounce of his concentration on the narrow slice of ocean behind the trailing submarine. And there, hidden in the wake of the first Akula, he found them. 2 more submarines. 2 more Akulas, traveling in formation behind the first, using its noise to mask their own presence. A wolfpack, operating with a sophistication and coordination that American intelligence had believed impossible for the post-Soviet Russian Navy. Marcus's hands shook as he documented the discovery. 3 Akula-class submarines operating in concert, tracking an American fast-attack submarine through the Arctic waters without detection. If not for his insistence on clearing the baffles, if not for his years of obsession with this vulnerability, they would never have known. He reported to Captain Harmon immediately. The captain's face went pale as he absorbed the implications. 3 of them, Harmon said quietly. My God, 3 of them, and we never would have known. The next few hours were tense as the Seawolf's crew processed this new reality. They had thought they were hunters, but they had been prey all along. Only the vigilance of their sonar section, only the persistence of one stubborn officer had prevented a potentially catastrophic intelligence failure. Harmon made the difficult decision to continue the patrol. They had a rare opportunity here, a chance to observe Russian submarine tactics in action. But he also implemented Marcus's full Baffles clearing protocol, the one he had rejected so many times before. The Seawolf played a delicate game over the following week. They maintained the illusion of ignorance, pretending not to know they were being followed while secretly gathering an unprecedented amount of intelligence on Akula operating procedures. They documented how the 3 submarines communicated using sophisticated underwater acoustic signals. They recorded how they coordinated their movements to maintain their concealment. They learned more about Russian submarine tactics in 7 days than the Navy had learned in the previous 7 years. When the patrol finally ended and the Seawolf returned to Groton, the intelligence she carried was immediately classified at the highest levels. The debriefings lasted for weeks as analysts pored over every scrap of data Marcus's team had collected. The implications were profound. The Russian Navy had not only maintained its submarine capabilities despite the economic chaos of the post-Soviet years, but had actually developed new tactics that represented a serious threat to American undersea dominance. The comfortable assumptions that had guided naval strategy since the end of the Cold War were revealed to be dangerously optimistic. Captain Harmon personally recommended Marcus for the Navy Commendation Medal, citing his exceptional performance during the patrol. But more importantly, he endorsed Marcus's Baffles clearing drill for fleet-wide adoption. I was wrong, Harmon wrote in his endorsement letter. Lieutenant Commander Webb saw a vulnerability that I dismissed. His persistence, even in the face of significant professional consequences, demonstrated the kind of moral courage we need. In our officer corps, his drill should become standard doctrine for all submarine operations. The recommendation made its way up the chain of command, sparking intense debate among senior officers. Some argued that the increased maneuvering would interfere with other mission requirements. Others pointed out that the fuel consumption would be significant. But the evidence from the Seawolf's patrol was impossible to ignore. In August of 1997, the Chief of Naval Operations approved a modified version of Marcus's protocol for all attack submarines. The web clearing drill, as it came to be known in the fleet, required submarines to execute unpredictable baffles, clearing maneuvers at irregular intervals throughout their patrols. Marcus himself was promoted to commander and given command of the USS Connecticut, a Los Angeles-class submarine assigned to the Pacific Fleet. He served with distinction for another decade, eventually reaching the rank of captain before retiring in 2010. But the story doesn't end there. The implications of what the Seawolf discovered in the Barents Sea continued to unfold for years afterward. The intelligence collected during that patrol revealed that the Russian Navy had developed a new doctrine for submarine operations. They called it coordinated stealth warfare, and it involved multiple submarines operating together as a single hunting unit. The lead submarine would track the target while the trailing boats remained hidden, ready to engage if the lead submarine was detected. This doctrine represented a fundamental shift in Russian naval thinking. During the Cold War, Soviet submarines had typically operated independently, relying on numbers to overwhelm American defenses. The new approach emphasized quality over quantity, using a smaller number of highly capable submarines to achieve objectives that would have previously required an entire fleet. American naval planners were forced to revise their assumptions about the undersea threat. The comfortable belief that Russian submarines could be easily detected and tracked was exposed as a dangerous illusion. New tactics, new technologies, and new training programs had to be developed to address the changed reality. The Seawolf class itself became a victim of these changed circumstances. Originally planned as a 30-boat class, only 3 Seawolves were ultimately built due to their enormous cost and the end of the Cold War. But the intelligence gathered during that 1997 patrol influenced the design of the next generation of American attack submarines, the Virginia class, which incorporated lessons learned about the importance of stealth and sensor capability. Marcus Webb became something of a legend in the submarine community. His story was taught at the Naval War College as an example of the importance of intellectual independence and moral courage. Young officers learned how his persistence in the face of institutional resistance had potentially prevented a strategic disaster. But Marcus himself rarely spoke about those events. In interviews after his retirement, he deflected praise and emphasized the contributions of his team. "I didn't do anything special," he said in a 2015 interview with a naval history publication. "I just listened. The ocean told me there was something behind us. All I did was convince people to pay attention." When pressed about his conflict with Captain Harmon, Marcus was equally modest. Captain Harmon was a good officer doing his job as he understood it. The doctrine at the time didn't support what I was proposing. He had every reason to reject my ideas. What matters is that when the evidence proved me right, he had the integrity to admit it and change course. That takes more courage than anything I did. The two men remained in contact until Harmon's death in 2012. At the funeral, Marcus delivered a eulogy that moved many in attendance to tears. "Richard Harmon taught me that being right isn't enough," Marcus said. "You have to be able to convince people. You have to build trust. You have to earn the right to be heard. I wasn't always good at that. But he gave me the chance to prove myself even when I hadn't earned it. I will be forever grateful for that." The story of the USS Seawolf's 1997 patrol remains classified in many of its details. The exact location of the encounter, the specific signatures collected, and the full tactical picture are still protected by national security restrictions. But the broad outlines have emerged over the years through interviews, declassified documents, and historical analysis. What's clear is that a single officer's obsession with a technical vulnerability led to one of the most significant intelligence coups of the post-Cold War era. Marcus Webb's insistence on clearing the Baffles, despite opposition from his superiors, revealed a threat that might otherwise have remained hidden until it manifested in a much more dangerous form. The lessons of this story extend far beyond submarine warfare. In any organization, there are people who see problems that others miss. They're often marginalized, dismissed as troublemakers or obsessives. Their ideas challenge comfortable assumptions and established procedures. But sometimes they're right. Sometimes their obsession with a seemingly minor issue reflects a deeper truth that the organization needs to hear. The challenge is creating environments where these voices can be heard without undermining the discipline and structure that organizations need to function. Captain Harmon ultimately found that balance. He gave Marcus enough latitude to prove his case while maintaining his authority as commanding officer. When the evidence supported Marcus's position, he had the humility to acknowledge it and the leadership to implement the necessary changes. That combination of openness and discipline, of intellectual flexibility and institutional stability, is what allowed the United States Navy to adapt to the changed reality of post-Cold War submarine warfare. It's a model that remains relevant today in an era when technological change and strategic uncertainty demand constant adaptation. Marcus Webb passed away in 2022 at the age of 63. His obituary in the Naval Institute's Proceedings magazine called him one of the most influential submarine officers of his generation and credited him with fundamentally changing how the United States Navy approaches undersea warfare. At his memorial service, the Chief of Naval Operations presented Marcus's family with a special commendation recognizing his lifetime of service. The citation noted his technical expertise, his leadership, and his moral courage. But perhaps the most fitting tribute came from a young lieutenant who had served under Marcus during his final command. Speaking at the reception after the service, she described what it was like to learn from him. "Captain Webb taught us to question everything," she said, "not in a cynical way, but in a curious way. He wanted us to understand why we did things, not just how. He said that real expertise isn't knowing the answers, it's knowing which questions to ask." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "And he taught us to never, ever forget what's behind us, to always clear our baffles, because you never know what's lurking in the dark. The ocean keeps its secrets. Miles beneath the surface, in waters so cold and dark that sunlight never penetrates, submarines continue their silent patrols. American boats and Russian boats, Chinese boats and British boats, all playing a game of hide-and-seek that has continued without interruption since the first nuclear submarine slipped beneath the waves in 1955. The technology has changed dramatically in the decades since Marcus Webb first strapped on a pair of headphones and listened to the sounds of the deep. Today's sensors can detect sounds at distances that would have seemed impossible in the 1990s. Artificial intelligence helps operators analyze the vast amounts of acoustic data collected during patrols. Autonomous underwater vehicles extend the reach of manned submarines, serving as scouts and decoys. But the fundamental challenge remains the same. The ocean is vast, dark, and full of places to hide. Submarines can lurk for months in the deep, undetected by satellites or aircraft or surface ships. They represent the ultimate stealth weapon, capable of delivering devastating strikes without warning. And they all have baffles. Every submarine, no matter how advanced, has a blind spot behind it where the noise of its own systems masks the sounds of the outside world. It's a vulnerability inherent in the physics of underwater propulsion, one that no amount of technology can completely eliminate. Marcus Webb understood that vulnerability better than almost anyone of his generation. He spent his career trying to minimize it, to develop procedures and technologies that would protect American submarines from threats they couldn't see. His success wasn't guaranteed. It required persistence, courage, and a willingness to challenge authority when he believed he was right. But, in the end, he prevailed. His ideas were adopted, his concerns were vindicated, and the fleet he served was made safer because of his efforts. That's a legacy worth remembering. The waters of the Barents Sea are calm tonight. Somewhere beneath the surface, submarines are moving through the darkness, each one hunting, each one hiding. The crews don't know what the future holds. They only know their mission: to patrol, to watch, to wait, and to always, always clear their baffles. because you never know what's lurking in the silence behind you. The history of submarine warfare is filled with stories like this one. Stories of individuals who saw what others missed and found the courage to speak up. Some of them are celebrated, many more are forgotten, their contributions absorbed into the institutional knowledge of the services they served. What makes Marcus Webb's story particularly compelling is not just the tactical success of his patrol, but the broader lesson it teaches about how organizations adapt to changing circumstances. The United States Navy of 1997 was struggling to redefine itself after the Cold War. The certainties that had guided strategy for 4 decades were suddenly obsolete. The enemy had changed, the technology had changed, and the operating environment had changed. In that context, voices like Marcus Webb's were essential. They challenged comfortable assumptions and forced the institution to confront uncomfortable truths. Without them, the Navy might have continued operating under doctrines that no longer matched reality, with potentially catastrophic consequences. The same dynamic plays out in organizations of all kinds. Companies fail when they become too wedded to past success and refuse to listen to employees who see emerging threats. Governments stumble when they discount warnings from analysts who challenge prevailing assumptions. Individuals make mistakes when they ignore the voice of doubt whispering in the back of their minds. Marcus Webb listened to that voice. He paid attention to his doubts even when they cost him professionally. And when the moment came to prove his case, he was ready. That's perhaps the most important lesson of this story. Being right isn't a matter of luck or intuition, it's a matter of preparation. Marcus spent years studying the Akula class, analyzing their capabilities, thinking about how they might operate. When he encountered them in the Barents Sea, he wasn't surprised. He was ready. The same discipline that made him seem obsessive to his superiors was the discipline that allowed him to recognize what he was hearing when most others would have missed it. His expertise wasn't just technical knowledge, it was a deep understanding of the problem, developed through years of focused study and practical experience. We live in an age of information overload, when attention is fragmented and expertise is often dismissed in favor of quick opinions. Marcus Webb's story reminds us of the value of deep knowledge, of the power that comes from truly understanding a subject. That kind of expertise takes time to develop, and it requires the patience to focus on a single area while others move on to the next shiny thing. But it pays dividends when it matters most. When the USS Seawolf was being trailed by 3 Akulas in the Barents Sea, Marcus Webb's years of preparation made the difference between success and failure. His knowledge allowed him to hear what others missed and to understand what he was hearing. The men and women who serve on submarines today inherit that legacy. They train constantly, honing their skills, developing the expertise that might one day make the difference between life and death. They know that the ocean is unforgiving, that a single mistake can be fatal, and that vigilance is the price of survival. They also know the story of Marcus Webb. It's taught in the schools that train sonar operators, told in the wardrooms of submarines on patrol, passed down from one generation of submariners to the next. It's become part of the culture of the submarine force, a reminder of what's possible when preparation meets opportunity. And every time a submarine executes a Baffles clearing maneuver, every time a sonar operator strains to hear what might be lurking behind them, they honor his memory. They continue the tradition of vigilance that he championed, protecting their ships and their shipmates from threats that hide in the silence. The ocean keeps its secrets, but it also rewards those who listen carefully. Marcus Webb listened better than anyone, and because of that, 3 Akulas were found in the silence, a vulnerability was exposed, and the United States Navy was made stronger. That's a story worth telling, that's a legacy worth preserving, and that's why, decades later, we still remember the stubborn lieutenant commander who refused to ignore what was behind him. The seas may change, the technology may evolve, and the threats may take new forms. But the fundamental lesson remains the same. Pay attention to the voices that challenge your assumptions. Listen to the people who see what others miss, and never ever forget to check what's lurking in your blind spot. Because in the depths of the ocean, as in life, it's what you don't see that can hurt you the most. The story of Marcus Webb and the USS Seawolf is more than just a tale of submarine warfare. It's a reminder of the importance of individual courage in organizational settings. It demonstrates how one person's refusal to accept the status quo can lead to transformative change, and it shows that expertise, patience, and persistence can overcome institutional resistance when the cause is just, and the evidence is clear. In the years since that patrol, the geopolitical landscape has shifted dramatically. Russia has reasserted itself as a major naval power, investing heavily in new submarine classes that build on the Akulas' legacy. China has emerged as a serious submarine force, challenging American dominance in the Pacific. The undersea competition that seemed to be fading in the 1990s has returned with a vengeance. The lessons Marcus Webb learned in the Barents Sea are more relevant than ever. The need for vigilance, for expertise, for challenging assumptions has not diminished with time. If anything, it has grown more urgent as the stakes have risen. The submarines that patrol today's oceans carry weapons of unimaginable destructive power. They operate in an environment where mistakes can escalate into international crises. The men and women who serve on them bear a responsibility that few outside the submarine community truly understand. They do it quietly, without recognition or praise, because that's what the mission demands. They spend months at sea, separated from their families, living in cramped spaces beneath crushing depths of water. They train constantly, preparing for scenarios they hope will never come. And they trust each other with their lives, forming bonds that only those who have shared such experiences can understand. Marcus Webb was one of them. He understood the burden they carry and the dedication they bring to their work. His contribution to their mission was not the weapons he carried or the battles he fought, but the ideas he developed and the procedures he championed. He made them safer, more effective, more capable of facing whatever challenges the future might bring. That's the highest tribute a military professional can receive, to know that his work made a difference, that the people who came after him were better prepared because of what he did. Marcus Webb earned that tribute through years of dedication, sacrifice, and unwavering commitment to his beliefs. The waters of the Barents Sea are cold and dark tonight, as they have been for millions of years. Somewhere beneath the surface, submarines are moving through the silence, each one carrying out its mission with the same professionalism and dedication that Marcus Webb exemplified. And somewhere, in the sonar rooms of those submarines, young operators are straining to hear the sounds of the deep. They're listening for the whisper of a contact, the hint of a threat, the subtle indication that they're not alone in the darkness. They're clearing their baffles just as Marcus taught them. They're never forgetting what might be behind them. They're honoring his legacy with every patrol, every listen, every careful analysis of the data their sensors provide. The story of the USS Seawolf's 1997 patrol will continue to be told as long as there are submarines and the people who serve on them. It's a story of courage, persistence, and the power of individual conviction. It's a reminder that even in the most hierarchical organizations, one person can make a difference if they're willing to stand up for what they believe. And it's a warning to never assume you know everything, never become complacent about threats you can't see. And never stop listening for the sounds that hide in the silence, because out there in the darkness of the deep, something is always watching, something is always waiting, and the only protection is eternal vigilance. Clear your baffles, check your six, and never forget the lessons that Marcus Webb taught us. The ocean keeps its secrets, but it also rewards those who are patient enough, skilled enough, and brave enough to listen. Thank you for joining us for this incredible story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to share it with others who appreciate tales of courage and perseverance. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and never stop listening for the truth that hides in the silence.